So, welcome, bienvenue, and bonjour. My name is Michel Beaulieu, and I'm the Honorary Lieutenant Colonel of the Lake Superior Scottish Regiment, and I have the privilege and pleasure this morning of being your Master of Ceremony for this historic event. I would first like to acknowledge and thank the combined bands of the Lake Superior Scottish Regiment, Pipes and Drums, and the McGillivray Pipe Band that preceded the parade this morning. On behalf of all of us present, I would also like to begin by acknowledging the original custodians of this land and pay my respect to the elders past, present, and future, for they hold the memories, the tradition, the culture, and the hopes of Indigenous peoples. I'd also like to recognize that we are on the traditional land of the Fort William First Nation, signatory of the Robin-Superior Treaty of 1850, and to acknowledge the role of the Métis settlement in the development of our community. Standing on the balcony of the Times Journal building on the 1st of August, 1914, Fort William's Mayor, Samuel C. Young, called upon every able-bodied man to defend the Empire. Along with the rest of the British Empire, the Lakehead was now at war. Generally, the people of Fort William and Port Arthur, and those in communities throughout northwestern Ontario, were surprised by the outbreak of war on the 4th of August, 1914. As Robert Mannion, Member of Parliament and veteran, would write decades later in the 1930s, comparative peace had existed so long that most of us had concluded that a real war between any of the great nations was impossible. Even after war became imminent, local leaders were adamant that it would not affect northwestern Ontario. In the early months, many hoped to avoid actual conflict. Local churches sang hymns and said prayers to plead with God, to intercede on behalf of peace. An Anglican Bishop James Sweeney, for example, who was visiting the Lakehead, lamented that the sinful act of war should not be allowed to bring along Armageddon. Sadly, they were wrong. We are here today on the very spot where the first full unit raised here, the 52nd New Ontario Battalion, bivouacked and trained until November 1915, when the battalion left for Europe, and we are here to dedicate this memorial to those who lost their lives. The 52nd was a diverse group, including a large number of Indigenous soldiers, and eventually, as replacements from other parts of Canada were received, roughly 30 Japanese Canadian soldiers were also added to this number. During the war, they suffered so greatly and reinforced so often that by the end of the war, the 52nd Battalion, of about 4,100 officers that went through its ranks, 743 died overseas. We have a number of special guests with us here today as part of our platform and dedicating party. When I mention your name, please stand if you are able to be acknowledged by those in attendance. Councillor Andrew Folds, representing the City of Thunder Bay. Lieutenant General Omer Lavoie, Deputy Commander of NATO's Joint Force Command, Naples, Italy. Honorary Colonel retired, the Honourable Madame Justice Helen Pierce, representative of the Lake Superior Scottish Regiment's Senate. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Engelberts, Deputy Commanding Officer, 38th Canadian Brigade Group. Lieutenant Colonel David Ratz, Commanding Officer, Lake Superior Scottish Regiment and the Thunder Bay Garrison. The Reverend Major retired, Carrie McLaughlin. And Elder Beatrice Twans-Hines, White Horse Spirit Woman. So at this time, I'd like to present the official message from Her Excellency, the Right Honourable Julie Payette, Governor-General of Canada and Commander-in-Chief. And this is what Her Excellency has sent. Nearly a century ago, Thunder Bay became the first city in Canada to adopt the poppy as a symbol of remembrance. Today, the city continues its tradition of honouring our men and women in uniform by dedicating and consecrating this new memorial. The members of the 52nd Battalion, Canadian Expeditionary Force, were volunteers. They were citizens. They were immigrants. They were First Nations people who came together in a concerted effort to serve Canada. And they paid a high price. In all, 743 lost their lives. Many thousands of others came back home carrying the physical and mental scars of war. For their service, for their commitment to liberty and peace, for their sacrifice, we owe them our gratitude. Our duty is not just to remember, but to take to heart the tragic lessons of war. Let us all continue to work together towards a more peaceful works and use the power of community and dialogue to contemplate a better future and inspire us to keep on dreaming. Thank you to the donors, volunteers, veterans, and supporters who have made this memorial possible. This space is a concrete way to honor those who served a century ago, as well as a gift to future generations and the entire city. I wish you all the best. Her Excellency, Julie Payette. I would like to now invite Councillor Andrew Folds, representing the City of Thunder Bay, to the podium to say a few words.
Good morning, and thank you to all of you for coming out this morning. I would like to begin by recognizing that the City of Thunder Bay was built on the traditional territory of the Ojibwe people of Fort William First Nation, signatory to the Robinson Superior Treaty of 1850, and we are also a historic Métis settlement. At this time, I would like to take a moment to represent all those in the platform party, and I'd like to take a moment to represent our leaders from First Nations communities, Métis leaders. Today, we have municipal leaders, provincial leaders, and federal leaders here today. Thank you for coming. We have branch presidents from many Royal Canadian Legions. We have representatives from the Native Vets of Canada, the Métis Nation Vets Association, and I'd also like to take a moment to recognize our donors and sponsors that have made today a reality. On behalf of the Mayor, City Council, and the citizens of Thunder Bay, I am pleased to join all of you today in memory and honor of the 743 officers and men of the 52nd New Ontario Battalion of the Canadian Expeditionary Forces who died in World War I. Today, we come together at this new war memorial that will help ensure the names of those brave men and officers from Port Arthur, Fort William, and around New Ontario, the New Ontario region, who volunteered to fight for freedom and the rights we enjoy today. They will not be forgotten. Indeed, the 52nd Battalion is an important part of our city and region's historic past, and is the only unit from the area that we have full records for from World War I. The 52nd Battalion was a highly decorated unit, at that receiving an impressive 380 decorations, including 1 Victoria Cross. We have come a long way since the days of the Great War. It was this very field where the 52nd Battalion congregated from around northwestern Ontario for basic training before they left for Europe. And today, we honor them as we reflect on the ultimate sacrifices made for freedom we enjoy today. As we look back at the 100 years since World War I, it is a somber anniversary, one that brings plenty of reflection as we recognize the deep roots we all share, the hurdles we've overcome, and the many opportunities available to us as a result of the efforts of thousands who that came before us. And it is because of those who came before us and their willingness to give all they had so that one day we can live in peace, that we are able to stand here today. This monument will ensure that the men and officers who made the ultimate sacrifice 100 years ago will be remembered for generations to come. Again, on behalf of the mayor, my colleagues on council, and the citizens of Thunder Bay, I would like to thank all of you, all of those who helped make this event and this very special war memorial possible. And thank you to all of those who came out today to show your support for this worthy endeavor. I encourage all of you to tell others about this location so that they can make time to visit and reflect on those who fought for all of us 100 years ago. Thank you.
This time, I'd like to invite Lieutenant Colonel David Ratz, Commanding Officer, Lake Superior Scottish Regiment in the Thunder Bay Garrison, to the podium.
To the Honourable Michael Gravel, MPP, Judith Monteith Farrell, MPP, Councillor Folds, Chief Peter Collins, Lieutenant General Omer Lavoie, as well as other representatives of our First Nations and Indigenous peoples, the other representatives from municipalities and townships of the region, and the representatives of the Royal Canadian Legion, people of Thunder Bay, family, friends. On behalf of the Lake Superior Scottish Regiment, I bring greetings and wish to thank everyone for attending this ceremony today. The young men and women formed up in front of the monument here represent some of the members of our regiment. A number of our members are currently overseas on a NATO deployment or are otherwise engaged in duties and activities which keep them away from us today. My address is mainly directed towards the members of the regiment, but also to the community which supports these men and women who wear the uniform in service of Queen and country. In the Canadian military tradition, infantry regiments have often been described as families. We, the Lake Supes, are no different. That family includes everyone who is currently serving in the regiment and has ever served, and extends to the regimental senate, our affiliated cadet corps, and regimental associations. Our family has been here for 134 years. Our heritage includes the 52nd New Ontario Battalion and the 141st Bull Moose Battalion, which served in the First World War. The 52nd Battalion gave us 18 battle honors, over 300 decorations for bravery, including 1 Victoria Cross. It gave us our regimental colors of royal blue and French gray, and our motto, Inter Pericula Intrepidi, which translates as fearless in the face of danger. Our family suffered over 3,000 casualties in the First World War. They served with distinction in such battles in France and Flanders as Mount Sorel, the Somme 1916, Flers-Courcelette, Anker Heights, Arras in 1917 and 1918, Vimy, Hill 70, Passchendaele, Amiens, the Scarpe in 1918, Drocourt-Quéant, the Hindenburg Line, Canal du Nord, Cambrai in 1918, and Valenciennes. That is why we are here today, to honor and remember those members of our family who died while serving with the 52nd Battalion, but also by extension, all those from the Northwestern Ontario region who also served. They came from all across the region, as has been mentioned several times. They were men like Frank Allard from Fort William, George Barnes from Kenora, Augustin Belanger from Port William First Nation, George Brown from Roslyn Village, Frank Kaza from Fort Francis, Alexander Delaronde from Nipigon, William Evans from Rainy River, Cecil Farley from Scriber, Horace Fox from Dryden, Alfred Galvin from Heimers, William Hotchkiss from Dorian, Rupert Rhodes from Ignis, and William Roy from Murillo. They were a cross-section of the population, including Canadian-born citizens, Indigenous peoples, relatively recent arrivals from the United Kingdom and other parts of the Commonwealth, but also Finns, Russians, Greeks, Italians, Belgians, Turks, Syrians, Netherlanders, Norwegians, Romanians, Danes, Swedes, and Americans. The Lake Superior Scottish Regiment perpetuates the honours, heritage, and traditions of those who went before us in the 52nd Battalion. As members of the regiment, we have every right to be proud of the accomplishments of our family. Along with that comes the obligation and duty to live up to their sacrifices. Every Lake Sup owes it to them to perform their tasks and responsibilities in garrison, in the field, in peace and war to the utmost of their ability, to be fearless in the face of danger. Every day, remember and be proud that you serve in the same regiment as those we remember today. Thank you.
I would like to invite Honorary Colonel Retired, the Honorable Madam Justice Helen Pierce, representative of the Lake Superior Scottish Regiment, to the podium to say a few words.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, over 6,000 men and women from northwestern Ontario volunteered to serve in the First World War. What was then Port Arthur became the center of military activity in the region. It was home to the 52nd New Ontario Battalion. Its members came from all walks of life and from communities across the region. Over 1,000 soldiers from all ranks left Port Arthur in November of 1915, bound for Europe. By war's end, about 4,000 soldiers had passed through the 52nd Battalion. As the monument tells us, 743 soldiers from the 52nd died in Europe. We are mindful that while the monument records the deaths of these men, it does not reflect those from the 52nd who were injured in the war, either physically or psychologically. The members of the Senate of the Lake Superior Scottish Regiment welcome all of you to the dedication of this monument. The Senate of the Lake Superior Scottish Regiment is a small group of men and me whose purpose is to support the regiment and to help maintain its customs and traditions. Many members of the Senate have previously served the regiment or the Canadian Forces. I think of the Senate as a ladies' auxiliary without the ladies. The Senate also supports the Army cadets associated with the regiment. This monument was conceived, designed, and implemented by the members of the Senate. It has been more than 2 years in the making. We are indebted to a Captain Retired Tim Grew, whose vision it was to mark the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. It was his idea that the individuals from northwestern Ontario who gave their lives should be named, just as you see here today. The late Lieutenant Colonel David Wilkie began discussions with the City of Thunder Bay on behalf of the Senate. Engineering designs were developed by Captain Retired Don Smith. A database of the names for the monument was painstakingly developed by Major Retired Barry Armstrong. After the vision came the search for a site. The City of Thunder Bay offered this green and peaceful place. It also assisted with site design. Just across the way is Military Field, known to the regiment as Soldiers' Field. It is a place where soldiers from the 52nd trained and drilled before departing for Europe. So you see, this is a fitting location. The Senate developed a budget for the project, sourced materials, fundraised, and anxiously watched. Captains Grew and Smith were tireless in their efforts, assisted by others. Many individuals and organizations from northwestern Ontario made donations. We were astounded by their generosity. We were also grateful for funding from the Department of Veterans Affairs. In dollar terms, the monument cost about $100,000. This project was also supported by in-kind donations for which we are thankful. The music is one example. In a Scottish regiment, we count the bagpipes as music. You will notice the flower bed that is a part of the monument. It will feature poppies in season. The Thunder Bay Horticultural Society has kindly offered to do the plantings. Monuments reflect the hopes of their builders. So what are our aspirations for this monument? Today is a day of gratitude for sacrifices made, a day of remembrance. But it is also a day to look forward. In remembering the lives lost, we dedicate ourselves to the art of creating peace. Peace in our neighborhoods, peace in our country, peace in our world. Please come and visit this serene and beautiful place on other days. Come and see the poppies. Watch the leaves fall and the wind blow. Have a seat on the bench and reflect. Bring the children and tell them the story of the people named here, lest we forget.
At this time, I'd like to invite Lieutenant General Omer Lavoie, Deputy Commander of NATO's Joint Force Command Naples, to the podium. Sir.
Hey, First Nation chiefs, elected officials, friends and family of the Lake Superior Scottish Regiment, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I can tell you it is a long way from Naples, and that's a good thing. I will begin my brief introductory remarks this morning by first congratulating the men and women, including the cadets and the band, on parade here for your drill and department. You look sharp, and please join me in a round of applause for the troops on parade. I'll also start off by saying that I'm absolutely honored to be here this morning to participate in this ceremony. I say that both as a boy from northwestern Ontario who grew up in Marathon, but also, and especially with great pride, as I trace the beginning of my military career back as a soldier here in the Lake Superior Scottish Regiment, and as the regiment's senior serving former soldier. And despite going on to forge a career in the infantry, in the regular force as a member of the Royal Canadian Regiment, I always consider that I have two regimental families, one of those being, of course, the Lake Supes. I'll depart from the script here briefly just to mention something very coincidental, that when I was asked to participate in this ceremony, something which I didn't really think was going to get approved to be able to come all the way from Naples to do it, I went to my boss, who's Admiral James Fogo, U.S. four-star admiral, commands U.S. Navy forces Europe and Naples, to get his permission to do it. And as coincidence would have it, his father fought in the Lake Superior Regiment in World War II, and then went on to have a career in the forces. So he'd asked me to pass on his best regards. When I asked him permission to come here, his answer was, "Well, only if he couldn't. He couldn't. So you got me. You got me instead." And also, with regard to regimental family, I'll say that I have two special guests here today. And I'll embarrass them slightly by asking them to stand. So Mrs. Audrey Saxford and Mrs. Catherine Saxford. So Catherine's grandfather and Audrey's father-in-law, Alfred Saxford, fought in the 52nd Battalion, and Audrey's uncle, among many other members of the family, but George Maycock, was killed in action fighting for the 52nd. So a round of applause for the Saxfords, please. I think these two family connections then segue to why we are here this morning. A regiment is sometimes characterized as a tree. The leaves, like soldiers, come and go over time, but a healthy, enduring tree has deep roots. And it is these roots that we are here remembering and celebrating this morning. We all know that the 52nd Battalion formed a pivotal chapter in the history of Canada and as part of the perpetuation of the Lake Superior Scottish Regiment. That chapter is marked with great achievement, but as I learned in battle as a commanding officer, it is especially marked with great sacrifice. The sacrifice of thousands of soldiers from northwestern Ontario who volunteered to serve their country and never returned, or return badly wounded, both physically and mentally. And this tradition and cycle of soldiers, both men and women from Northwestern Ontario, has continued through all of Canada's major wars, and sadly, so has the sacrifice. And I would be remiss if I'd not mentioned that I believe today, do we have Miss Carol Kluge in the audience? Carol, if you're there, either wave or stand up. Carol. So I think as many know, Carol's son Josh, Thunder Bay boy, was killed in Kandahar, Afghanistan on 29 September in 2006 during Operation Medusa under my command as the battle group commander. And please, a short round of applause as well to recognize Carol being here this morning and her sacrifice. So ladies and gentlemen, I promise I keep my remarks short. I'll say the currency of war is human sacrifice. So in closing, I would ask that when we reflect on the rich achievement of this great regiment, emblazoned on its regimental colors in the form of battle honors, many from World War I, we also reflect on the painful sacrifice behind the great accomplishments of the 52nd Battalion, Canadian Expeditionary Force. Inter Pericula Intrepidi, thank you.
At this time, I would like to invite the Reverend Major Retired, Kerry McLaughlin, to the podium.
Bonjour, Creator. Bonjour, miigwech. Thank you, Almighty God. As we mark this solemn and sacred moment to honor the men of the 52nd New Ontario Battalion, who gave of their lives, those who walked many roads, who chose to surrender their lives in service of Queen and country, of their nations. We honor them as we dedicate this monument, the sacrifices they, along with their families, offered. We say miigwech for the willing spirit of those who heard the call of the Spirit to service, who left Mother Earth to travel across the great waters, who knew what it was to love freedom and those who loved them. We honor their families, we honor them, and we say, miigwech, Creator, as this monument stands as a reminder of the 743 lives and of the families who still remember them. We pray this all to you, Creator. Miigwech.
They were young, as we are young. They served, giving freely of themselves. To them we pledge, amid the winds of time, to carry their torch and never forget. We will remember them.
To Horatio LSSR, the 52nd have done their duty. Stand down.
You may be seated.
Pray! Stand down! Easy!
At this time, it is my honor to once again introduce Elder Beatrice Twans-Hines, who will sing In Flanders Fields.
Bonjour, it's an honor to be here today to remember those who gave their lives and here where they trained to go overseas to fight, and it's an honor for me to sing my rendition of In Flanders Fields. Miigwech. In Flanders Fields, miigwech.
Miigwech, Elder Twans Hines.